Oh, I'm seeing the stream is live, everyone. Apologies. Yeah, technically, you gotta love it. Season 2, first episode. There's always going to be teething problems, right? We are live. Thanks, amazing team.
Oh, we've got a little bit of a lag from
Working.
Daniel, it seems.
Oh, I think are we all back? Fingers crossed. Can you hear me? Okay.
Gotcha.
You gotta love like the technical gremlins on the first episode back, season 2. Hey everyone, hopefully I'm good. My internet will hold up. It's great to see so many folks back again. Today we're going to be talking about building scalable internal developer platforms with Syntasso Kratix Enterprise. I'll introduce my amazing hosts, my amazing presenters in just a second. But a little bit of housekeeping. One thing I would say is if you want to ask questions, please feel free in the LinkedIn chat. We'll try and take some live questions. And I've got some prepared already. We've got a bit of a structure for general kind of like overview of building platforms in general, but then I'm happy to take any questions along the way. That we do find the audience questions are often the most interesting questions, so don't be afraid to reach out with questions. So I'll hand over for a quick round of introductions. Abby, would you mind saying who you are and hello to the good folks?
Of course. Hi, I'm Abby Bangser. I am an engineer at Syntasso, been with the company a couple of years now. And I think the most exciting thing and the reason why I joined Syntasso is I have a history of working on internal tooling teams. So from different roles, not always platform engineering, sometimes QA and SRE and otherwise. But it's really nice to be working on a product that I know past Abby would have been really excited about, and I get to see what current day platform engineers are able to do with it. So yeah, it's a bit about me.
Amazing. I think it's a lot of the big theme of the Syntassians. We're often ex-platform engineers or ex like consumers of the platform, right? I think that's why we've joined Syntasso. We want to build better platforms, so past me, future other people can enjoy the platform use. Thanks, Abby. Awesome. Jake, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. I'm Jake, staff engineer at Syntasso. Been here just 2 months shorter than Abby. Abby beat me through the door. Prior to that, I was working at Weaveworks, sort of working on a few of their open source tools. And prior to that, at Pivotal, working with some of the founders on Cloud Foundry. So yeah, it's been nice working at Syntasso, sort of bringing together my past experiences working on platforms, working on GitOps, and bringing it together with Kratix today.
Amazing, Jake. Amazing. Many of us have like worn multiple hats along the journey, right? As I started as a software developer, then moved more into platforms, and you get to see both sides. You can empathize with both sides, right? And we're going to dive into that more today with this overview of building platforms. We'll look a little bit at platform engineering, then we'll dive into how some of our customers are using Syntasso Kratix Enterprise, and we'll cover much bigger picture concept stuff as well. So super excited for the conversation. As I mentioned, don't be afraid to put in your Q&A along the way. But I'll kick off. Abby, let's start with you. What do you think the biggest blockers organizations face when adopting platform engineering?
Yeah, we're seeing that actually a lot, right? That people are talking about getting started with the platform engineering, but struggling to get out of the gate sometimes. And I think, or struggling maybe after they've been working with platform engineering for a little while to feel like the initiative can keep moving, keep rolling after 6 months or so of working on it. And I think the biggest thing that people hit is that they haven't set the reason or the goals behind why they're doing the platform or platform engineering in the first place. And that's what particularly will trip people up when they feel like they've been moving towards platform engineering for a few months, but can't keep the momentum going. It's because no one has agreement on why you're even doing this work. And I say agreement, not understanding, because everyone always has something in their heads. But if it's not shared understanding, if you don't know that you're doing this for cost optimization or compliance and security ease, or maybe developer experience, which is probably the most popular one to talk about, then all of a sudden prioritizing what you do becomes a lot harder because there are just so many things to do. And so I think maybe one other blocker, and it goes hand in hand with that lack of a goal, is when you focus so much on the tech first and you end up in these really big swings of either completely burn it with fire from where you currently are, feeling like, we've done all these things and it's not fitting our purpose anymore. We need to restart from scratch, all the way through to, well, we have all of this. We can't move to any new tech because we need to keep using what we have. We have experts in these technologies. We have, business deals with their vendors and so on. So we have to keep doing it. And both ends of the spectrum are focusing on the technology you have today rather than the goal that hopefully the organization has set. When in reality, you're going to probably land in the middle somewhere. And when you have that eye on the goal, the technology will fall into place in the end. So.
Perfectly said, Abby. I'll definitely do a shout out to our previous webinar series, season 1. I remember Sarah Wells echoing your comments there. Paula, our boss, echoing comments like, if you don't have your goals, you never know where to aim for, right? So massive +1 to that one. Jake, over to you. Can you walk us through a real world example where Kratix has accelerated the platform engineering and platform adoption that Abby talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been really lucky while I've been at Syntasso. I've been here a long enough time that I've got to work with a lot of orgs, sort of small, large, and see quite a lot of the different usage of Kratix. I think the biggest trend I see about how people are using it and how they've been successful, and so it's quite a common story across most of the large companies we have, is that they have this sort of existing platform today where maybe they're doing a ticket-driven workflow, and it's they might not even describe it as a platform, but it is a platform, right? People are going to them, they're getting the things they need, maybe not in the time that they would like, but they are getting them. And the sort of thing that we've seen the most is that once you start using Kratix, it sort of gives you this space to bring together the different people in the organization to collaborate on that platform. I think traditionally, and I think it's just so common in large companies, is that they have a ticket system, somebody takes responsibility for delivering that ticket, and all that person actually does is just go and wrangle the different teams to get them to do the different tasks they need to do. So go talk to your security team. What does it mean to spin up a VPC? Go talk to your databases team here. What does it mean to bring up this Postgres? And what we see is once they sort of take all those processes and try to actually codify it, put it in a real platform that's driven by an API that is automated with workflows behind the scenes, it really gives them an opportunity to sort of start delivering the value quicker and also make the experience of people consuming it much nicer, right? If you're going from months to just days to getting access to things, or even minutes, it's just a real incredible turnaround that really just drives adoption and makes the consumers of the platform much happier.
Yeah, perfectly said, Jake. I've got to shout out our other boss, Colin Humphreys. He did a great blog on the Syntasso blog around platform democracy. That's what we've definitely heard our customers sort of echo the sentiments you mentioned there, and calling it democratizing the platform, which I think is a nice way of putting it. And also tip to Kat Morris, one of our colleagues, amazing article on the new stack that was out last week. I think it's currently trending #1 in the platform engineering category, so do check it out. But she talks a lot about producers, consumers, or providers, consumers, and how you kind of bridge those two worlds. So yeah, love that. Absolutely love it. Abby, what's the one common mistake organizations make when rolling out internal platforms, and how can they avoid it?
Sounds like I'm the pessimist with all these where are things people going wrong? But I think that the reason these are interesting questions is because we do see trends, and Jake actually alluded to the antidote to the problem, which is having APIs and having services that are on demand and self-service. I think the where that solves the problem is when people look to centralize their offerings into the platform without having that as a service mechanism set up. And what I mean by that is that platform engineering is an evolution from DevOps as a widespread practice in an organization. It doesn't remove DevOps from an organization, since DevOps is more of a methodology on how you deliver software, but it does change the sort of expectation on each team for what they provide themselves versus what they can rely on from a third party provider, an internal platform team or platform organization. And so with DevOps, you'd have each team doing their own thing, building their own stacks, getting their own compute, their own data, and so on and so forth. With platform engineering, we talk about an internal team being able to provide those dependencies as a service. That is great, but if in your transition to platform engineering, you find yourself wading back into those dangerous worlds of centralized ops without the as a service mechanism, you're going to start to feel the same pains that led to DevOps in the first place. Those pains of having people put in requests and wait days, weeks, months, and have confusion over what is being requested. And you're also going to have a huge load on those internal teams trying to provide services to everybody in that manual way. So yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that people have is centralizing without the as a service mechanism in place.
Yeah, love it, Abby, love it. And look, we've got to talk about Kratix. That's what we're all working on, and we're all super passionate about at the moment. We've got Kratix open source, and then Ski, which is our Syntasso Kratix Enterprise product. Definitely encourage folks to check out both things. Jake, I'd love to get your thoughts on definitely a talking point I imagine we'll have at the KubeCon booth in a couple of weeks' time. So folks watching, come and find us all at KubeCon and Plat Eng Day 2. But I imagine a lot of folks there, because very strong open source community. We love the CNCF community. They're going to be asking, how does the Syntasso Kratix Enterprise differ from Kratix open source?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think if I was in their shoes, I'd definitely ask them the exact same question. I think, I think at its core, I think the main thing to understand is that Syntasso Kratix Enterprise is a sort of set of layers on top of open source Kratix. It's not like a fork or a replacement. It sort of comes alongside it and makes it easier to do Kratix. I think sort of the strength and equally the weakness of open source Kratix is that it's so open, it lets you do anything, which means the fact that it lets you do anything, it means that you have to do a lot of work sometimes to get certain bits up and running. And that's where we're sort of trying to bridge that gap of being, okay, you can do everything open source, but we're going to make that life easier, that experience quicker and better using Enterprise. So I think some of the things that we do in our Syntasso Kratix Enterprise offering to try and make that easier is things like portal integrations. Like we have integrations with Backstage, with Port. These are all things that you can do natively today in the open source, but we're just going to do it, trying to like take that heavy lifting of getting that all wired up, doing that communication, just doing that all for you. So you can focus more on delivering the sort of the value a platform provides like under the hood, as opposed to worrying about how are people going to interact and consume it. And the same goes for other tools that people might want to interact with. We see things like, Terraform Enterprise is a really common tool we see people using to like reconcile their Terraform. Again, today, you can use that on open source Kratix, that's fine. But what we bring in the enterprise is just integration to make it really easy and really seamless to interact with tools like that. So yeah, I think those are like the main differences. And I think the one last thing I would say is the input into the product, I think, is the largest sort of value add, I would say. Like Kratix, as like Syntasso itself, still a reasonably early company. The product's still growing, still developing, and like when you're paying for that enterprise feature, you're sort of getting that input into the roadmap. You're getting more interactions with us, and yeah, it's just more control over your future.
You're pitching more time for you, Jake. More time chatting to me, like telling me all the good features and the bad features, and like I'll feed it back to the team, right? That's a fantastic pitch. Excellent. Javi, I'll put you a nice question, a happy question your way, riffing on your earlier comments. How does Kratix make self-service API creation easier for the teams?
Yeah, I make the statement that one of the challenges is centralizing about the as a service. So how do we get over that hump when you're used to providing things as code templates or through kind of maybe ticketing systems such as Jira or others? The move to something as a service is difficult. And so one of the things that we've done with Kratix is we've created a CLI that you can use to take existing infrastructure as code mechanisms that have inputs and outputs and execution involved in them and turn them into something that sits behind an API. So you can stop handing out that code and asking the users to touch on the code. You can start using an API. So I'm actually just going to share my screen. I've got a little bit of that set up here just to share that over. I hope that in a second you might see a browser window where we've got some I've got that sharing. Let's see if that goes live. So when I talk about different types of code, there's a few different code types that are very popular for infrastructure as code that have those inputs, outputs, and execution. And when you go look at our CLI tool, you can see that we've got a few already implemented. So whether you're using Crossplane with the XRDs, Helm with the charts and the values files, operators with their own CRDs and Kubernetes, or Terraform with their modules. These are some examples, but we have Ansible and Chef and so many others that all fit the same pattern and are just going to get rolled out in time. And Terraform's a really good example for this because I have to accept that this was the platform I put out not long ago. In previous roles, I offered my engineers, the app developers, as a service by making a pull request into a repository that ran Terraform. And that's because with Terraform modules, you can wrap up a whole bunch of things into what is a really simple interface. So, these are the number of modules. There's hundreds and thousands of them around. You might use the public ones. You might have your own internal ones. But this is a great example of what can be wrapped up that's complex and made easier. So this module for a bucket that's provided by Thoughtbot has a number of things that it can create along with security policies around it and access and an S3 bucket in AWS, of course, but such a simple set of inputs in comparison to all those things it has to configure and wire up. And that's the experience that a Terraform module can give you. And it screams the same positivity as an API, except when your application developers have to learn Terraform and they have to learn these things. I remember getting into little tiffs around just naming convention when people would put in a pull request. They would use snake case instead of title case, or whatever the patterns in the code were. And those are not the conversations you want to be having because they can erode that sort of trust and relationship. And And so you either end up not having consistency in your code base, or you end up with a bit of a tense relationship between your users and your platform teams. So what we can do is, if I switch here to the terminal again, I can run another terraform init command, which you can see I was practicing earlier, so I won't try and type live. That is going to use that terraform module promise example and set a API group in kind for it to create. This is now going to be internal. So while the module was thoughtbot, we can now take this and turn it into our own internal platform API. So with our company name and type. And we can point at any module that exists on the web and whatever version it's at. When I press go, what that's going to do is it's going to translate the values file for that module into a API. And let's just go look at that API. If I just open that up here. And what you can see is that's made a Kratix promise. And that Kratix promise has a few different top level kind of pieces to the specification. The API, which is what I'm going to look at first, and that is what your users actually provide. And you can see it conforms to a CRD from Kubernetes. It's got that open API v3 schema that makes it so easy to add validation and anything that you need to from an API point of view. And it has all those same fields that we saw in the thoughtbot offering on GitHub, but it's just repurposed into this new API format, making it accessible. From there, what we need is a way to be able to actually create the Terraform objects when someone makes a request. And that is done through a pipeline object. And so on the resource configure lifecycle, so on that would mean when things are created, when things are updated, when things are just reran on a regular reconciliation. What we do is we take that same module source at the set version and we translate it in from the open API v3 schema that your user provides into the Terraform format. So let's just go and do that. So I can kubectl apply the promise.yaml file that we've got, which is great. And then I can see that I now have that promise available in my cluster. From there, I can apply the resource example. And that's going to create, I can now just have a look at that file so you can see what I'm trying to create. Just create an S3 bucket called example. Now, we know S3 buckets need to be globally unique. This is an example of how this would be created. You'd have to make sure that fits the requirements. But what that's going to do behind the scenes is it's actually going to make a commit into a Git repository here. So I just refreshed. We can see that just now a file has been committed. This file is the Terraform version of that request. So I now have a name of example, which is the user input, and I have the source, which the user didn't have to know that this was a thoughtbot-based module. That was codified in your platform. And now, all of a sudden, with a simple command in the Kratix CLI, you have transformed a request for a Terraform object from a pull request that you have to review, that you have to nitpick over naming conventions and things on, into an API that can make that commit into your repositories. It can still be a pull request if you want, manual approval, but doesn't have to be. And it allows you to use your same deployment mechanisms with Terraform you have today. So whether you're using Atlantis or Terraform Enterprise or one of the Kubernetes reconcilers, they all do the same thing. And this is going to help you really accelerate that move to an as a service mentality. So, yeah.
Love it, Abby. Love it. As a sort of, I wrote my fair share of Terraform over the years, and I love that. For me, the revolution was the workflow was standardized. Whether I was deploying on AWS, on like GCP, Azure, right? Love that. But to your point, it was never really like API driven. It was always me writing code and then like triggering it, like typically via Jenkins or to your point, Atlantis or whatever. So like I making the abstraction more developer friendly, I think is the thing, right? Like sort of that Terraform like interface to an API, and we're choosing like CRDs in this case. Like I, as a developer, like I'm like, yeah, that makes it much simpler for me to understand the thing, right?
And I will say, I think like an API doesn't have to always be an API request, as you say. It doesn't have to be always CRDs. It just means that you can use the interface that you'd like rather than having to worry about the implementation interface, which is the Terraform in this case, or Helm or Crossplane or wherever else you choose to use. So.
Yeah, love it, love it. I think I've got one more question for you, Abby. Then Jake, yeah, you're on the demo block next. The demo gods have been good so far, right? Which is great. Abby, your blog from the News Stack was awesome about the thinnest viable platform. I think you riffed on some of the stuff that Matthew and Manuel from Team Topologies have talked about as well. So why is the thinnest viable platform concept so important, and how does Kratix help achieve this kind of approach?
Yeah, that was that blog post was a lot of fun to write because it started as a soapbox a bit, I have to admit, and it resulted in something that I think is proven to be very high value, which is that nuance between minimum viable and thinnest viable. So with minimum viable anything, you're talking about how to get started small and then build from there based on feedback, based on need. And that's great, but humans already default to building new. They already default to wanting to build from things rather than to take away from things, right? We talk about this a lot. And so that's where thinnest viable brings a huge amount to the conversation. It says, yes, start with minimum viable. Start with as little as you can, whether that be a wiki, which is one of the examples that the Team Topologies folks use quite a lot, or anything else that you might have. Start small. But no matter how small you start, it's going to grow. That's what minimum viable expects. And then the question is, how do you keep it small? How do you keep it maintainable? And this is where thin comes in. As an internal platform provider, your goal is to not recreate the entire web. Your goal is not to recreate the entire cloud provider. Your goal is to leverage as many commodities like cloud providers and SaaS solutions and open source vendors as you can, while making sure to codify your specific business needs on top. So keeping a platform thin allows you to plug in your specific business needs while trading out bespoke complex solutions for commodity solutions when they become available. And I think the example I gave there was when I had to put together a harness to manage zero downtime database deploys, which then miraculously came out as a cloud vendor provided feature. And I'm like, wait, so I can just like change one field in my my Terraform code and I don't need this whole harness anymore? That's great. I'm going to thin out my platform and I'm going to remove that complex thing that I had to write because it didn't exist at the time I needed it and trade in for something that's a lot easier to depend on. And that's where we were able to keep that platform thin. So.
Yeah, love that. Great story. I definitely encourage folks. I know it's scrolling on the screen. Do check out that blog because it's a really valuable concept. Like, I think MVP versus like TVP is often confused, Abby, and myself included,
Yep.
right? But I think like when I read your blog, I was like, yeah, like I totally get it in terms of like that. I think Gregor Hopper talks about the sort of rising platforms and things,
Yeah.
floating
I
platforms.
love
Love
that one
that.
as
Got to
well.
shout
Floating
out Gregor.
platform.
Like, yeah, that is well worth a read on his platform strategy book as well. Fantastic stuff. Like, sort of related to this, Jay, we get a lot of questions around secret management, like it's Syntasso, right? So how does Kratix the Promise Framework improve service management, sorry, I should say, service management and platform scalability?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think Kratix itself, sort of like I was talking about earlier, like a lot of platform teams today won't have that central place where they have a stored reference of what are all the things on my platform, where are they, what's the configuration, are they up and running? And Kratix tries to provide a place for you to do all of that to make it a bit easier. I think rather than speaking to it much more, I think I'd rather just show it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully it will go as smoothly as Abby's did. So let me go ahead
Set a high bar, Abby, high
and
bar.
do this. If you let me know, Daniel, when you can see my screen.
Yes, give it a second, Jake. Ta-da! Oh, wouldn't mind making the font a little bit bigger, Jake, but other than that, I can
Yeah,
see you.
absolutely. So what I have here, just to describe my sort of setup, is I already have a Kratix running, and I've got a few promises installed already, so I can just show you those. So you can see I've got a variety of promises available. So these are things that consumers of the platform can ask for. So they could ask for, an environment, a Kubernetes cluster, a MongoDB, whatever the platform has got available. So these are all published in Kratix. They've been made available on the platform in Kratix. And because they're being made available there, when a user makes a request, you can also track it in Kratix. So if I was to get like the Kubernetes clusters, I can see, okay, 3 clusters have been provisioned. If I try to get the Mongo databases, you can see them here as well. So Kratix is providing that sort of central place for you to see what's available, but what's also been requested. And one of the nice things about this is because the platform is just built on Kubernetes, anything that knows how to talk to the Kubernetes APIs can also be a portal for your platform. So in this case, if I switch over to the browser, I've got the exact same sort of information being displayed, but this time in Backstage. So you can see here what promises are available, as well as seeing, okay, what requests already exist. And you can see I've got a variety of promises with a variety of requests. So that's sort of the service management, sort of seeing what's available, what's already been provisioned. But Kratix also helps with the sort of day-to-day operations of, all right, now I've got all of these things provisioned. How do I manage them? So one of the things Kratix tries to help with is sort of continual reconciliation, like always checking, are my services deployed? Are they healthy? Is anything wrong with them? So in this case, I've got a MongoDB promise installed. So if I go back here, you can see there's a Mongo promise. And if I show you the requests, I've got a few Mongo instances here running at a few different versions. And you can see that a couple of them have got some vulnerabilities detected. So this is my platform doing that sort of daily scan to say, hey, what instances do I have? Do they have any vulnerabilities? Has some new CV been released I need to be aware of? So in this case, this is just letting you know, hey, for the versions that are running version 4, there's a vulnerability, but if you're running a version 5 or version 6, you're absolutely fine. In a traditional organization, you might have to go and talk to your application developers and say, hey, you've got a MongoDB that's running, or they might not even know they have it, but they have one running and it's insecure. Can you please update it? With Kratix, because everything's being managed by Kratix, everything's being displayed by Kratix, you can sort of just do all of that management in one place. So you might be asking, hey, this warning, does this mean that the user has to come and upgrade it? In this case, the answer is no. It could be that you say to the user, provide this specific version of MongoDB you want to be deployed, and then it's up to the user to come and change it. But if I actually show you, like, the API of this particular promise that we're looking at here is saying actually what major version of MongoDB you want. That's the contract. The user specifies the major. The person owning this offering, the platform team, are the ones saying, okay, I know this major means this actual minor, this actual pat version of Mongo. So in this scenario, the ownership to upgrade the MongoDB instances on the platform team. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to do an upgrade and sort of try and resolve this issue. So what I have is a updated version of the MongoDB promise that that contains the fix to basically upgrade my fleet from the non-compliant version of Mongo to a compliant version. And all the platform engineer has to do is encapsulate all that logic and do a promise, and then just install the promise. Kratix will take care of rolling out the upgrade to the fleet. So if I go ahead and install this upgrade, Kratix is going to take it, and it's going to re-reconcile all the requests for Mongo that exist in my cluster. So if I was to watch my pods that are running in the backend, you can see a whole bunch of lines of code here running, but all this is basically saying is that it's re-triggering all the pods, all the workflows that own all of these MongoDB instances, and making sure they're compliant with the new desired state of the world. Which the end output should be that it's pushed out some new documents to update all your Mongo instances to a secure version. So if I come back to Backstage and hopefully click refresh, we can see now it's letting us know, hey, there's no longer a vulnerability. You were running 4.4.23, now you're running 4.4.24. Everything's all good.
Nice.
So that's sort of just a quick sort of run through of how you can manage your services at scale with Kratix.
Got a question coming in, Jake. How's the component description got updated with this warning?
Yeah, so in this particular example, the promise itself in its workflows are the ones that are creating the documents to schedule a Backstage. And these documents are just files on the disk in the actual workflow. So all I have is a container that runs after the documents have been scheduled, that does the security check, and then it just updates the description that's going to be scheduled to Backstage. So it's just like an extra step in my workflow. Like once you've got your Backstage documents, just update the description with like, yes, it's vulnerable, or no, it's secure.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah, and I've seen people use.
sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna say I've seen people use notifications there as well, right? So sometimes like there's more passive kind of deprecations and more active, and sometimes you can do the same thing where instead of just updating the status, you can send a Slack message, you can send an email, whatever kind of format you have. Open a Jira ticket for someone, open a Snow ticket for someone, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good thing is it can sort of suit the different personas. It might be you need to send, an email to the team owning the promise, but like, hey, we really need to ship an upgrade. There's a CVE, but also like a Slack message, like you said, to the application developers to say, hey, just so you know, this instance is insecure. You may or may not, depending on how it's being used, need to change your usage.
Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. We've got a few questions coming in. The team are keeping an eye on various places. I know there was a slight LinkedIn glitch at the beginning, so if you do want to jump on the Kratix Slack, have a quick Google around, find the Kratix Slack. You can DM us there as well. DM me, probably the best thing to do, and I can take your question. I've got a couple coming in. Stacey's asking, classic, yeah. How do I convince my leadership team to adopt platform engineering? So I don't know, Abby, this is probably riffing on your earlier platform engineering thing, right?
Yeah, given I'm talking about all the challenges with it, maybe I can also help with some of the solutions, right? Yeah, I think this is like a tough one, right? Because the places where I found the most success, both as an individual contributor myself, or as like a teammate myself, and as a consultant, and with with customers from Kratix, is that it's where you get kind of both sides engaged, and that's that whole goal setting side of things. As an engineer, I don't know what level engineer you are or where you are in an organization, but often there's a point in time when you realize you have to start speaking the person's language, not your own. So I remember going into meetings with very high level people being like, I want to upgrade Kubernetes. And they're like, what is Kubernetes? I'm like, your entire company runs on Kubernetes. How do you not know? But it just wasn't their space, right? They weren't the CTO, they were another role. And so instead need to talk to them about their pains, right? Hey, we can only move so quickly, or hey, we're getting charged a lot more money because of this, and I'd like to take some action to reduce that pain that you're feeling. And so I think with platform engineering, that's the key: is get that goal set across both leadership and engineering. What are you trying to achieve? And then really always speak to that goal whenever you're talking about any actions you want to take in platform engineering.
Yeah, love it, Abby. It reminds me again, I had to be Gregor Hopper a whole bunch today, but he talks about the architect elevator, right? And he talks about like the language you use at the penthouse is very different than the boiler room, and neither are better or worse than each other or whatever. It's just exactly what you said, Abby, using the right language. I've been on exactly the same journey as you when I was like trying to convince C-level people versus my teammates, whole different language set, right? So I think that's a really good shout. I've got another one, perhaps one for you, Jake. Chris is asking, how difficult is it to get started with Kratix? And I think both of you demoed the Kratix CLI, which caught people's attention by the look of it too.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think we tried to make a lot of progress in making that initial developing a promise experience as easy as possible. Like Abby was showing, like the initializing a promise from a Terraform module, from a cross-plane composition, from a operator, from a Helm chart. So that sort of initial getting your promise written, we tried to do a lot of work to make that a lot easier. I would definitely recommend checking out the CLI. I think it's just has made that experience much better. But then from like the running Kratix side, I think that's definitely a journey we're still going on. I think it's gotten a lot easier. I think we have a good quick start on our docs on getting started. But I think the biggest thing is just not to get too intimidated by Kubernetes. I think it sounds complex. It sounds like it's something really difficult, but actually the way that Kratix is utilizing it is relatively simple. The sort of boundaries of what you need to know about Kubernetes to use Kratix is not actually as big as a lot of people fear it might be.
Yeah, good chat, Jake. Somewhat related, actually. So Catherine's asking, how do developers interact with Kratix? Is it CLI exclusive, or I guess we showed backstage, but is it ULI, CLI, API? I think a bit of confusion around there. I don't know who wants to take that on.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, I'm saying it's confusing because the answer is all. But at the root of
Yeah.
it, it's all happening via the API. So Kratix itself, what you get from the open source immediately is just an API exposed in Kubernetes for doing all of like sort of the CRUD management of like creating a promise or creating requests. But the fact that it's built on top of Kubernetes means it's really easy to then say, okay, I want to plug this into a CLI, or I want to plug this into my portal. Because at the end of the day, it's just an API that's a very standard. There's a lot of conventions around it. Like Abby was showing, it's built upon a very sort of common schema of like the Open API BP schema, so it's a very easy API to interact with. So yeah, it's all API at the end of the day, which means it's very easy to use any tool you want.
Love it, Jake. I'll do a shameless plug. I wrote a blog, I think about a year ago now, right, with the 3 layers, and I talked about like the API, the platform, and like the UI versus the infrastructure. So shameless plug, folks. Check out my blog on the Syntasso blog about that kind of concept. So perfectly answered, Jake. Perfectly answered. A couple more. We're pretty good time. So what are day 2 operations? Does Kratix address them? How can you provide examples? Don't know who
Yeah.
wants to take
So
that one.
day 2 is tough, right? Or just first of all, just to like level set, I assume with day 2, what you're meaning there is things that are sort of in the general life cycle of a resource rather than creation from the start, right? And I think so often tools only talk about creating; they don't talk about updating or changing or deleting it later. And so with Kratix, it's not only do you have create and delete as you would any other resource in Kubernetes. It also has those workflows that run on a regular basis and on changes and on updates. And so you can codify any changes you need to there. And so what we're seeing people do just in the wild is being able to codify changes like adding new features to things, alerting deprecation notices. That that demo comes from examples from people that we're working with and seeing that be something that brings high value. And so we want to make sure we kind of spread that out and show it more widely. So I think deprecation notices, introducing new features are two of the most common versions, and then of course the security patching, right? So the specific example that Jake went through of being able to change the version of something is the kind of key feature for a platform. When you're sitting with compliance risk, you sometimes just have to go in and get things changed, and that's where Kratix Day 2 can come in to help.
Thanks, Abby. Lovely. Yeah, we definitely get a whole bunch of those questions, I think, at KubeCon. So looking forward to chatting about that, because we often talk about day 1, day 2. I remember both sides, from an app developer and from an operator. When I was building platforms, they're very different experiences. The day 1 and day 2 of app dev versus infra. So fantastic. I think I saw Michael ask a question, popped up on the screen. Just let me double check. Do you see companies moving to platform engineering and using IDPs when they have monolithic databases? Ooh, bringing back memories for me there, Michael. I'm not going to lie, on microservices on top of the monolithic database, but I think that's a great question. Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I think the thing I want to call out with monolithic databases is there's sort of two patterns we talk about when it comes to platform services. We talk about the pie and the slice. And what we're doing here is we're saying sometimes someone comes into the bakery, comes into your platform and asks for an entire pie, and they just get the whole thing and it's all theirs and it's theirs and it's isolated. Sometimes they are coming in and they're asking for a slice of the pie. Multi-tenancy and single tenancy is the technical terms, but way more fun talking about pies. And so Kratix promises can work in both formats for that. Now so first of all, technically, absolutely able to. You're asking, are people doing this? And I think that this is where you have to look at the maturity of the organization in their maintenance and operations on that database, on if they're actually able to make those moves. In particular, if their database is something that they are still doing manual changes to and they're kind of tender-footed around, no, they're not going to start all of a sudden giving a portal to an API to make an automated change against that database. But being monolithic in nature does not inherently mean that it is unstable or not automated. And if it does have that automation around it, if it does have that stability around it, there's no limitations for being able to introduce new tenants, introduce new databases inside that larger instance, introduce new tables, etc. There's no limitations there.
Yeah, +1. We talk a lot about brownfield, and again, I think, is it Kat has done a fantastic article about brownfield development. So folks, and I think that's on one of the maybe our blog or some other platforms as well. So we definitely say start where you're at. I think it's a temptation, particularly as one of my app dev days, greenfield was magical, right? But the reality, most enterprises we work with, it's brownfield. You got to start somewhere, whether it's monolith, whether it's old infrastructure. So kind of start somewhere and make improvements. I think that's perfectly said. I will wrap up, folks. We're coming out to a time check now. Final question. So what is your top advice for companies looking to scale their internal platforms efficiently and securely? Abby, do you want to take that one? I think we bookmarked you for that one, if that's all right.
Sure, that's all the tough ones. No, I think look, obviously come use Kratix would be the easy answer, but I think really the core of what I think is so important is that you leverage the high value knowledge you already have in your organization. Daniel was already talking about start where you are, brownfield. You have experts, you have automation, you have processes, even if they're not automated, that have brought you to where you are as an organization. Trying to throw all those away and start from scratch is going to be a very long journey and likely lose some of that essence of why you do things the way you do already. So democratization of your platform was something I think also came up a bit earlier. And that means getting all of those specialists, all those experts involved and able to contribute. It makes it a true platform in the sense of people able to contribute offerings and other people able to come and pick up those offerings, rather than a centralized ops team scrambling to keep up with requests for a new feature, requests for a new an extension of an existing feature and those kinds of things. Instead, you enable those experts to own those features, own those extensions, and the platform can focus on enabling that behavior and putting guardrails around the behavior of offering services and requesting them. So yes, I think scaling is all about leveraging your people as best you can. So
Fantastic. Should we sneak in one more question? I appreciate the audience is jumping on now, and it actually dovetails, I think, onto your point about like scalability. Migrations often get talked about, right? So Erin's mentioned, Jake, do you want to like just wrap this one up, and I'll do a little KubeCon pitch at the end. But how do you deal with migrations and transitions, migrating applications to Kratix?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think when it comes to sort of using Kratix, obviously everything we've shown today is about running things as a promise, having it fully automated, and getting that end-to-end experience. But I think that doesn't have to be, the minimum viable amount of things you have to get working to use Kratix. I think a lot of the time we see people is that, okay, they have all these things in their organization that they want to provide. Maybe they're doing tickets already. Maybe they already have some in-house CI they want to use. But really, to get that first sort of step, that first step on the journey to using Kratix would just be, all right, take an offering you have, provide it via an API, but just have the way you're doing it today be exactly how you do it today. So don't try and say we have to automate it. We have to spend 6 weeks automating this process. If it's process you have today is that you create a ticket and somebody goes and spins up a SQL server manually, just do that as your very first step. So you write your promise, you have that API. What information do I need from them? That fires a workflow that just creates a ticket in Jira, just like you were before, and have that that human go and do the things they have to do. You're sort of getting people using the platform the right way. So thinking about using it as an API. What are my inputs? What are my outputs? But then giving you the foundation to start moving to automate this stuff, right? Just because it's being manually done today doesn't mean that in 6 weeks from now it has to be done manually as well. You sort of have that space to start adding in layers and layers of automation. So I think it's just it's like sort of taking this big picture and just breaking it down into individual services and slowly automating them behind the scenes.
Love it, Jay. Love it. And that's actually perfectly queued up. Excuse to say, Abby's card game, Stack the Deck, right? So if folks are thinking about how to design services, exactly as Jake was describing. I know, Jake, you worked on some like proof of values that are with our customers, and this is then emerged around sort of how you shape promises, we call it, how you create services. Abby's actually refined this into a card game, which you're bringing along to KubeCon, Abby, which is a perfect segue. Folks, come along and see us. We're at PlatEng Day. We're sponsoring PlatEng Day. We're also sponsoring KubeCon for all 3 days. You'll find myself, Jake, Abby, and many others from the Syntasso team on the booth at various times of the day. But I think it's on Wednesday evening, I want to say, Abby, you're doing your inaugural presentation of the card game, right?
yes, I'll have it with me if you find me at the platform coffees or elsewhere. But we're gonna spend some time just before and during the booth crawl, just hanging out, having a play, and yeah, it should be really fun.
Yeah, like definitely really helped me think, to Jake's point and to Abby's point there, of like what my inputs are to a service, what's happening, and then what the outputs are. And it's fundamentally good API design, right? But we'd love to get feedback. Like I say, Abby's put a lot of time and energy, and I really do appreciate Abby. The deck is looking fantastic, and the whole team behind the scenes have done a lot of amazing thinking in this space. So tap into their expertise and come along and find us at KubeCon for a chat. If there are any more questions, we'll try and finish these up in LinkedIn or wherever you've posted your question. We might publish a blog post wrapping things up as well. So apologies if we didn't get to your question. We will come back at some point and try and answer everything there. Do appreciate all the interaction. We always love live questions. Thank you so much. But at that point, I'll wrap and I'll say we'll see you all at KubeCon. Thanks everyone's attention. Thanks Abby. Thanks Jake.